Chat application. A chat application that uses LangChain in a Postgres database to manage chat message histories. User. Actor. Provides chat input to the system. LangChain. Data flow. Sends chat messages to LangChain for processing. LangChain. Control flow. Initiates the chat processing workflow. LangChain. Processor. Processes chat messages, generates responses, and utilizes context from chat history. User. Data flow. Sends generated chat responses back to the user. Postgres database. Data flow. Retrieves chat history data for context. Postgres database. Control flow. Triggers storage of new chat history data. Postgres database. Data store. Stores chat history data and provides retrieval functionality. LangChain. Data flow. Provides chat history data to LangChain for context. This component is responsible for managing chat message histories using a PostgreSQL database. Adds a new message to the chat message history. Retrieves chat messages from the history based on the conversation ID. Clears the chat message history for a specific conversation ID. The LangChain Postgres chat message history component interacts with a PostgreSQL database to store and retrieve chat message data. A PostgreSQL database used to store and manage chat message histories. Provides persistent storage for chat message histories. The database contains a table named Chat Message Histories to store individual chat messages. The table within the PostgreSQL database that stores individual chat messages. Stores chat messages with attributes like message ID, conversation ID, message content, role, and timestamp. The LangChain Postgres chat message history component accesses and manipulates data stored in a chat message histories table. Entry point for user queries. LangChain application. Query. Out. Core of the system. Receives user queries, processes them, and produces responses. User interaction. Response. In. Postgres database. Checkpoint load. Out. Postgres database. Checkpoint save. Out. Stores and retrieves checkpoints for the LangChain application. LangChain application. Checkpoint data. In. LangChain application. Checkpoint data. Out. LangChain Postgres checkpoint system. This system is responsible for managing the state of a LangChain model by persisting it to a Postgres database. LangChain Postgres checkpoint. Subsystem. The primary component that handles checkpointing operations. Run manager. Component. Manages the execution and state of the LangChain model. Chain state. Component. Represents the current state of the LangChain model, which needs to be persisted. SQL Alchemy. Component. Provides an interface to interact with the Postgres database. Checkpoint serializer. Component. Serializes and deserializes the chain state into a format suitable for storage in the database. Load checkpoint. Function. Retrieves the persisted chain state from the database and reconstructs it. Save checkpoint. Function. Persists the current chain state to the database. Database. Subsystem. Stores the serialized checkpoint data. Postgres. Component. The specific database management system used. Checkpoint data. Data. The serialized chain state stored in the database. Checkpoint serializer. Load checkpoint. Data flow. The checkpoint serializer provides the serialized chain state to the load checkpoint function. Load checkpoint. Save checkpoint. Control flow. After loading a checkpoint, the system may decide to save a new checkpoint. Save checkpoint. Database. Data flow. The save checkpoint function sends the serialized chain state to the database for storage. Database. Load checkpoint. Data flow. The database provides the stored checkpoint data to the load checkpoint function. The system's data flow revolves around the chain state. The run manager maintains the chain state. This state is serialized by the checkpoint serializer and then stored in the Postgres database. When the system needs to resume execution from a previous state, it retrieves the serialized chain state from the database, deserializes it, and updates the run manager. The system's control flow is driven by the need to manage the LangChain model's state. The run manager is responsible for initiating checkpointing operations. It determines when to save or load checkpoints based on the execution context. The decision to save or load a checkpoint is made by the run manager, which then triggers the corresponding functions within the LangChain Postgres checkpoint subsystem. Represents the overall LangChain checkpoint mechanism that utilizes a PostgreSQL database for storing and retrieving checkpoint data. A serializer responsible for handling the serialization and deserialization of checkpoint data. Using the Python pickle library. Constructor method to initialize the serializer with a connection to the PostgreSQL database in the name of the table where checkpoint data is stored. Loads checkpoint data from the specified table within the database. Saves checkpoint data to the specified table within the database. Serializes the checkpoint data using the pickle library. Deserializes checkpoint data using the pickle library. Establishes and maintains a connection to the PostgreSQL database. A dedicated table within the PostgreSQL database used to store the serialized checkpoint data. Represents the serialized LangChain objects and other relevant information that constitute a checkpoint data. The pickle library is utilized for serializing and deserializing Python objects to facilitate storage and retrieval from the PostgreSQL database. Database table. Database table. Checkpoint data. Pickle library. Provides text input and queries. LangChain Postgres vector store. Text input. Stores text data and queries for retrieval. Stores and retrieves text data and embeddings. User. Relevant documents. Provides retrieved results based on queries. Document store. Text data. Stores text data for embedding. Embedding model. Text data. Embeds text data. Postgres database. Embeddings. Stores embeddings. Stores text data for embedding. LangChain Postgres vector store. Embeddings. Provides embeddings to the vector store. Generates embeddings for text data. LangChain Postgres vector store. Embeddings. Provides embeddings to the vector store. OpenAI API. Text data. Requests embeddings from the API. Provides embeddings for text data. Embedding model. Embeddings. Provides embeddings to the embedding model. Stores embeddings for efficient retrieval. LangChain Postgres vector store. Embeddings. Provides embeddings to the vector store. LangChain architecture with PostgreSQL vector store. User input. Provides the initial query or input to the system. Captures user's input in the form of text or a question. Sends the query to the LangChain LLM component. Initiates the processing pipeline. LangChain LLM. The core language model processing component. Processes the user's input and generates an embedding representation. Receives the query from user input. Generates an embedding. Sends it to the PostgreSQL vector store. And receives retrieved data back from the vector store. Manages the interaction between the user input, vector store, and distance strategy components. PostgreSQL vector store. A database for storing and retrieving embeddings. Stores embeddings and retrieves the most similar embeddings based on the input from LangChain. Receives the embedding from LangChain. retrieves data from its database based on the input embedding, and returns the retrieved data to LangChain. Manages data storage and retrieval based on the LangChain component's requests. Distance strategy defines the method for calculating the distance between embeddings. Calculates the distance between the input embedding and embeddings stored in the vector store based on the chosen distance method. Receives embeddings to compare from the vector store and returns a similarity or distance score to the vector store. Provides a mechanism for choosing and applying a specific distance calculation method. Cosine similarity, a distance measure based on the angle between embeddings. Calculates the cosine of the angle between two embeddings, indicating their similarity. Receives embeddings to compare from the distance strategy component and returns the similarity score to the distance strategy component. Provides a specific method for measuring similarity between embeddings. Euclidean distance, a distance measure based on the straight line distance between embeddings. Calculates the Euclidean distance between two embeddings, indicating their dissimilarity. Receives embeddings to compare from the distance strategy component and returns the distance score to the distance strategy component. Provides a specific method for measuring dissimilarity between embeddings. User input, LangChain LLM. User input sends the query to LangChain for processing. The query is sent as input. LangChain LLM. PostgreSQL vector store. LangChain sends the generated embedding to the vector store for retrieval. The embedding is sent as input. PostgreSQL vector store. LangChain LLM. The vector store returns retrieved data based on the provided embedding. Retrieved data is returned. PostgreSQL vector store. Distance strategy. The vector store sends embeddings to the distance strategy for comparison. Embeddings are sent as input. Distance strategy. Cosine similarity. The distance strategy utilizes cosine similarity to calculate similarity between embeddings. Embeddings are sent as input to calculate the similarity score. Distance strategy. Euclidean distance. The distance strategy utilizes Euclidean distance to calculate dissimilarity between embeddings. Embeddings are sent as input to calculate the distance score. LangChain LLM. User input. LangChain sends the generated response back to the user input. The response is sent as output.